minute.
Chair, I know Deputy Chambers can't be here, so could we have two each? And we'd be only the same as the Minister then.
I'll give you a minute and a half each. Sure. Okay, Deb.
Thanks, Lascan. So last Wednesday, Minister, my colleague Deputy Daly hosted a briefing by members of the Aer Lingus Supplementary Pension Scheme, the second scheme. I attended to discuss very serious issues, I think, which emerged with the wind-up of the scheme, and I understand that up to 2,500 workers and pensioners are entitled to a share of the £106 million pension fund known as Pot B, or the second scheme, which is currently being wound up. Though members, of course, raised concerns when they began receiving letters detailing their allocations, because they soon realised, Minister, that there didn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to the method of distribution of funds, which had been decided without consultation by the trustee, the Irish Pensions Trust. And as you know, Minister, this second Aer Lingus supplementary scheme, it operated from 2007 to 2014, and Aer Lingus paid 4% pensionable salary on behalf of employees, and the employee paid 2% in all, and additionally the government provided 34 million from the sale of Aer Lingus. Striking, of course, with the decline in the value of the fund by 2 million down to March 31, 2016, and the fact that administrative expenses increased by over 100% between 2015 and the wind-up. So when the wind-up was mooted, members believed they'd receive their allocated contributions and a fixed percentage of the performance of the scheme. But this hasn't happened, Minister. There's been a total lack of consultation with members, and the proposed distribution seems erratic, inconsistent with the principles of the scheme, and totally unfair in many members. And Deputy Daly gave a number of examples when she raised this with the Taoiseach himself a few days ago. So on behalf of constituents, Lascan, I'm calling on the trustees and the regulatory authorities, the Pension Authority and indeed the Pension Ombudsman, to investigate the distribution of the second scheme and to explain why were there no other options afforded to members, as is usual in many other schemes, and what's the accounting and actuarial basis on which the distribution is based. And I'd like the Minister to ensure also that such an investigation takes place. Thanks, Cian.
You got your 2 minutes. 2 minutes, Deputy Daly.
And can I say that I know Deputy Chambers and indeed Deputy Darrell O'Brien also wanted to be here today and would be singing very much from the same hymn sheet as us. I suppose this is urgent because the wind-up of the financial interests of this scheme is underway now. It's a scheme that was in existence for 8 years, whereas Deputy Broughan has said workers paid between the employer and themselves an average 6% per head, as it were, 34 million into the kitty beforehand. The benefits objective was discretionary, and there was no requirement for the method that's been used by the trustees now to be implemented, and there's no impediment to them actually changing their minds. And what has really aggrieved people is the unilateral decision-making, which has meant that every group of people involved in this scheme is being affected. For example, there are 394 current pensioners of this scheme. Their average weekly benefit from this is 45 cents per week. The trustee proposes in their instance to buy annuities for these pensioners out of their interest. Annuities are exceptionally pricey at the moment. It would be far better for them to have the purchase of approved retirement funds, for example. Again, in the case of deferred members, the trustee wants to buy pre-retirement bonds, most likely with one of the big insurance companies, but he's advised if you want to transfer out of the PRB he's chosen, well, there's going to be a fee on you opting out on that scheme. So no discussions whatsoever, and as we discussed here last week, an incredibly unfair distribution of the financial interests, where people of a similar age who made similar financial contributions could be getting a difference of between, say, as I said last week, putting in 10,000, getting back 12,000, or instead putting in 22,000 and getting back 84,000. There is a method there, but it's an unfair method, and we really are urging and hoping that the Minister and the Department can intervene with the Pensions Authority in relation to the matters.
The Minister's 4 minutes.
Thanks, Deputies, and also to the Deputies that are not absent here, because I know obviously particularly in the environs of Aer Lingus and the constituencies that touch it is a particularly rife issue. So it's just to outline that The trustees of any scheme have a duty and responsibilities under trust law and under the relevant legislation under the Pensions Act as amended, and the duties of a pension scheme trustee include administering the trust in accordance with that law and the terms of the trust deeds, and consequently any decisions made by corporate or individual trustees of an occupational pension scheme are governed by the relevant legislation. Trustees have a basic obligation to carry out their duties, firstly in accordance with the law and the terms of the trust deeds and the rules, but actually, most importantly, they are obliged to act in the best interest of all of the scheme beneficiaries, whether they are deferred, active or receiving a pension. And I think that is probably what is most relevant to this particular case. So an active member who is elected as a trustee has to act in the best interest of all of the members, and if there is a conflict of interest, then it's the person's duty as a trustee must take precedent over other interests. If it is considered that the benefits due are not being paid in accordance with the rules of a pension scheme, the member concerned can invoke a dispute resolution process, and procedures within the scheme is obliged then to operate. If they are still dissatisfied, they can bring a complaint to the Pensions Ombudsman or the Pensions Authority. And I hope that you can appreciate in my position, I cannot comment or intervene directly in the pension arrangements applying to a particular scheme. However, where there are issues in relation to a particular scheme, when they are raised with me that do cause concern, as this one does, we notify the Pensions Authority and ask them to intercede. And I'd like to confirm to the deputies, both here and absent, that the matter relating to this particular scheme has been raised with my department, and we have in turn raised it with the department, with the Pensions Authority, who have agreed to examine it and to come back to us and report. The Pensions Authority are going to assess if there has been a legal breach of their obligations and take any necessary action if there is a breach found to have been taken place. The pensions body, although it's a body that's under the aegis of my department, regulates pension schemes entirely independently of the department, so therefore I'm not in a position to influence or comment on them, or on the process, or maybe even the length of time that it's going to take. But all I can say is that they were very happy when this concern was brought to them last week, that they would intervene and that they would address their concerns to the trustees, and we await a response to come back to them. So I hope that clarifies and indeed insists the deputies have raised the matter.
Thank you. Deputy Broughan has 1 minute.
Lascan. And well, I do welcome what the Minister said in relation to the Pension Authority. The Taoiseach, I think, did give a commitment to Deputy Daly that you might organise a meeting for herself and the other two interested deputies, and indeed others, to see what we could do within the current legal situation. Can I ask you, just in relation to social welfare pensions and civil registration bill 2017, will that actually address some of the problems which have arisen in relation to the administration of funds, such as the second scheme with Aer Lingus? And is there any conceivable way that if you like, that the ambit of that legislation, could be utilised on current wind-ups? It was disturbing, Minister, to hear that from ordinary members that they didn't receive, annual benefit statements. People seem to be unclear about how AVCs operated, and indeed the basic fact that there was no consultation whatsoever in relation to the wind-up. So I hope this is something that yourself and the Pensions Authority, would take action on, and would ensure that there isn't a recurrence in any other scheme, and that the current problems are addressed. Thanks.
Deputy Daly, 1 minute.
Corla, well, Minister, I certainly welcome your response, and you are absolutely right. The trustees have huge power in this area, and that's where it really rests. That's a legislative shortcoming. I welcome the remarks made by the Taoiseach last week that area is under review, and that the Pensions Authority are going to look at making sure that trustees behave in a more accountable and transparent way. I welcome the fact as well that you have notified that the Pensions Authority are agreeing to examine this area. As a sort of word of warning on that, however, we're never happy, is that This scheme has been delayed in its wind-up for another number of years. Millions have been bled out of it while the trustees waited to decide what to do, while the resources were in cash and effectively losing money. It's consumed £2 million in the course of 2015, 2016, just by sitting there in fees and professional fees and so on. So a further delay runs the risk of having that situation. So members are very keen to have the financial interests distributed, but they want them distributed in a fair way where staff have options and a way of addressing. So that's my one word of caution in that. So hopefully the intervention from the Pensions Authority will be timely and measured, but it is important that we go back to the drawing board on it, because certainly the method of distribution now, while there is a method in it, is very much one of madness and needs to be changed. Thank you, Karen Corley.
Thanks, Deputies. Again, I wasn't actually aware that the Taoiseach had promised a meeting, so apologies for not coming, but I don't even know whether there's a need for it now, and if there is, I'm absolutely happy to organise it with the relevant people in my department. But just to say, I hear what Deputy Daly is saying. It's not within my gift to put a timeline on the request, but I can certainly impress upon the authority as to the details that you've just outlined. But also to say to Deputy Broughan, although the information that has been provided has caused me concern, that doesn't necessarily mean that anything has happened is wrong or illegal. So therefore I think it would be it probably wouldn't be helpful if I was to concur with you that further legislation is needed. So all I'll say is that, look, I will express the concerns regarding the timing back to the authority, and whatever the outcome of this is certainly will be reflected in any future legislation. I think you're aware that our own legislation bill is coming back on November the 9th. I'm not sure whether we'll have this back enough to address the issues, but I can give you a guarantee that whatever issues, if there are issues that arise from the treatment of this pension fund, will be addressed in future legislation as long as I'm sitting here. So.
Okay, that concludes topical.